I want to come back to mental health issues. Do you feel like, and I'm going to insert something here, do you feel like it's more prevalent today than it ever has been? And one of my kind of like thoughts around this idea is that today we live in the easiest society. We live in the time of the world, of the planet, where it's easiest to survive than ever before. It's easier to survive now than ever before from the standpoint of like, we don't really have that many life threatening issues from things like other predators, etc. And therefore, and like we're not farming, we don't have these constant problems that we're having to deal with. And I think that oftentimes our focus dictates our emotions and our mental state. And so like we were always in the past having to focus on all these problems that we're having to solve and potential predators, etc. And now we don't have those things. And now oftentimes our focus turns to internal and focus turns to us. And so like that's just kind of like a theory as to why I feel like we oftentimes do actually experience more mental health issues today than we did in the past, because it's like our focus is turned in on us rather than on external issues and external problems or whatnot. So kind of like with my little thoughts inserted in there, what are your thoughts on, is it more prevalent today or is it actually just more talked about today?
No, I think it's greatly prevalent, more prevalent than ever before. I think your assessment is right on. I think obviously, as I mentioned, technology has clearly been the biggest experiment that no kid has ever given their approval of, and yet they're the subjects of this experiment. It's going to have major ramifications for the rest of our lives, for those that grew up on technology, and really for everyone. We really have to think this through because our brains were not meant to have this kind of level of stimulation. And so that's part of it. And the disconnectedness in society, because we're now not talking to each other and socializing in the way that traditionally we have in previous generations. But I would also say these are also the illnesses have been around forever. Like when my book, going back to my Profiles in Mental Health Courage, it was, the title came from President Kennedy's Profiles in Courage. And I decided to look at the senators that he featured in his book, which was about political courage. And I found John Quincy Adams, our president of the United States, lost two of his brothers to alcoholism and his son to suicide at age 28. You had a whole host of other, Daniel Webster, great U.S. Senator, died of cirrhosis of the liver. Sam Houston, first president of Texas and a later U.S. Senator, was known as the big drunk. Lucius Lamar saw his father take his life in front of his house after coming in the house in the front door, writing a little note, walking out and taking a pistol out and shooting himself. Like, these are all the people that President Kennedy featured in his book Profiles in Courage, because all of them were like super courageous politically. At that time, even when President Kennedy wrote this in the late 50s, no one would ever think of digging into their backgrounds. Like, what relevance does that have? But the point I wanted to make is that these have been around forever. These illnesses have been around forever. And as we know from our families, alcoholism has just been around from the beginning of time. And it's really shocking. It's taken us until this day and age to like think, well, maybe we should start to take this seriously. I mean, when you think about how many family members it has taken out through premature death and through suffering and disability, it's shocking. We are so wanting as consumers in America to make a better life for ourselves. And yet we totally block out this part of our lives that is so essential to our success and happiness and fulfillment, which is the mental health part. And we keep it silent. We don't talk about it. Shh. And you know what? It gets worse when that happens. So we have to figure out how to tell our stories in a way that is non-stigmatizing, that opens up the conversation, which is why people should read my book, Profiles in Mental Health Courage. And it's got all the best critics reviews because I partnered with a professional journalist who knows how to write, and specifically around mental health. I got 12 people who not only share everything about their own journeys, but I talk to their spouses, their kids, their parents, their coworkers, which often, Nick, is left out of any of these narratives because these are illnesses that affect the whole family. right? If I never got addiction myself, I'd still be disabled by the fact I grew up with two parents who suffered tremendously from alcoholism, one who was totally debilitated by it. And the chaos in my home because of that has really impacted my emotional choices, thinking, decisions. All it affects your whole life. And so what I'm saying is like, we really have to be, like I support this national organization for children of alcoholics because everybody is impacted by their environment. And who's going to impact you more than your parents?
Right.
So I'm just trying to say here, there's lots that we need to be focused on in this space. And unfortunately, Nick, up until COVID, this was really just the purview of quote unquote, those special mental health advocates. Really what it needs to be is the purview of everybody. Business needs to be about this, athletics, education. Frankly, the military can't recruit people because they can't pass a drug test. We cannot meet our recruiting goals. This is an issue affects every aspect of our nation's well-being, its economy, its health. Our criminal justice system is rife because it's essentially the default for a lack of a public health system for mental health and addiction. And we still stick our heads in the sand on this. And so people read Profiles of Mental Health Courage, they'll learn about various stories. It's messy. There's nothing easy about this, but they get a better appreciation for the complexity of these illnesses. Doesn't mean we can't treat them. I just want people to have eyes wide open. And I also, for those who are suffering, I want them to not feel alone. And when they read other people's experiences, they'll say, hey, geez, I'm right in the middle here. No one else is any different than me, which I think is helpful for them not feeling so isolated. So, and in the back of my book, I have a QR code if people care about changing public policy, because that's my expertise. And I really want to build a political movement where people can advocate effectively for a different system in education and healthcare and every other area for a better mental health system for our country.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it takes going to take like a societal and cultural awareness and change, because this is one of the biggest issues, if not the biggest issue that we're actually experiencing right now. I think oftentimes people feel like at all times, my biggest issue that I'm experiencing is that I'm not going to have enough money to live. And so then they think I'm going to prioritize the majority of my time to making money so I can live. And it's like, obviously it depends on the person, but for a lot of us, that's not the primary thing that might wipe us out. It's going to be mental health or physical health. And so I think it's just really important for people to actually understand that that is one of our biggest issues that we need to counteract and prevent. And so we need to allocate time in our calendars for it. We need to allocate time in our calendars specifically for mental health and having conversations with people and physical health and exercise and cooking and things like that. Like, I think it needs to take a shift in our culture, a shift in our society to encourage, like, this actually needs time in our calendar.